we have two different, we have the Webster Dictionary definition, which is just the quality or state of being functionally adequate or having sufficient knowledge, judgment, or skill to do something. So in communication, it's being functionally adequate in daily communication, having the knowledge to be able to communicate, the judgment, and the skill to be able to communicate. So with that, there are three key components from that definition that we're then using to build that competence. So we want communication to be functional, meaning that it is with the demands of our daily environment, but that also means that it's natural, right? We can't just expect that we pull kids out to the speech room and that they become really good at communicating in the classroom or in their home. We have to take all of those environments into consideration, and it's also context dependent. So if we have a sub, if there's new people in the environment, that might change the functionality of our communication. And one big thing with it is it's interpersonal, right? So we can't just say we're a good communicator because we feel like we're a good communicator. What matters is that other people around us feel like we're good at communicating, that we can communicate with those people. And this is dynamic, meaning it will fluctuate and change. So from year to year, when I go to a new class, when I'm in a new situation, I might not be as functional at communicating as I was at a different school with a different person. So it changes, and we have to take that into account. So we're looking at functionality, also adequacy. Adequacy doesn't necessarily mean we're perfect at it. It just means we're able to get the things done that we need to, right? We're accomplishing a task. And then sufficiency of knowledge, judgment, and skill. This is where our 4 areas of communication competency are going to come in. So for knowledge and skills in tool use, we're looking at linguistic competence and operational competence. And then for the function and judgment, that's going to be social and strategic competence. So now we're going to go into these areas of communication competence. So these are the 4 areas that in that article, Janice Light is saying, hey, if we're able to do these 4 things, we are a competent AAC user. We're going to break each of these down a little bit and then I have some case studies in here where we can practice using the different competencies to write IEP goals. And then as we go through, however fast or slow, we can do more practicing with case studies, or we can bring in some of our own, students' questions if you guys have that. So if you have any input or thoughts or questions, definitely interrupt me. So with those 4 areas, getting started, linguistic competence. This is often where we start, right? Being able to have the words we need to communicate. And a lot of times our goals, when we're writing goals with AAC users, we're thinking about, okay, do they have the words? So the ability to understand and use language within their system, but also within the spoken language, right? We have to know how to hear and understand spoken English, and then also understand and use our AAC system. So we're looking at vocabulary, syntax, also understanding symbolic representation. That can be an area of this. And then we get the multilingual considerations coming in here as well. Like, I have a student who's a Spanish speaker. Should I be providing them AAC with Spanish? So that's a linguistic component as well. And this is when we're thinking about building linguistic competence, we want to think about both receptive and expressive language. So what they're understanding and what they're using. So with that first competence in mind, what we're going to do is I'm going to pull up a case study, and I want you guys all to look through it and get into, maybe a couple of small groups. And what we're going to do is use the case study to draft a goal that would work on linguistic competence with this data. So this is Elijah, again, AI generated, some things that he's able to do and some data. So we can pick any of the areas if you want to make a goal and, hey, let's see how we can build linguistic competence in math. We might use that to make an IEP goal. So go ahead, and I'm going to give you guys like 5 minutes to go through this. If you have any questions, and then we're going to do this for each of the different areas of competence. Yeah, you can do it by yourself or with a small group of people. So it could be, so any
one of those
Yep.
that you have.
just a smart IEP goal, so like examples, if I'm looking at. He has a difficulty answering comprehension questions, my linguistic goal might be. Elijah will demonstrate understanding of question words by answering comprehension questions from a story that he's read in 80% of opportunities. So thinking about linguistics and the words, any of these areas, what kind of goal you might want to. And if anybody has one they want to share, maybe we'll shorten it to like 3 minutes. There's like 30 more seconds to discuss. Okay, so does anybody have thoughts or goals that you had come up with for Elijah relating to that? Linguistics. So linguistic is kind of, again, one that we're more familiar with, right? These are kind of goals that we're used to writing. Like they're going to express their wants and needs, they're going to express the words related to that. So this is kind of one of the easier areas. Does anybody have any thoughts or input? Any goals you made?
Our goal would be, one of the things that we could work on would be to initiate asking a question to one of his peers. And so you can make a goal just saying they will initiate a question in social interaction with one of his peers.
Good, yeah, in our speech and social language.
It said up there that he has a problem engaging with peers.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a funner one to work on.
Yeah, more fun. And yeah, definitely. So the kind of the goal with this is we can think outside of the box as far as the goals that we're making, right? So social engagement, that kind of goal could still be a good language arts goal, right? If we're doing a lot of, peer interaction, peer editing, knowing how to interact with your peers in that kind of situation. So it's not just, hey, I'm an SLP, so all of my goals are going to be speech related. It's, hey, how can I team up with the other people on the team? So that's not just a, hey, the device is a you thing. How can we get, parents and teachers and some of those other people saying, hey, this is how this can be used in my area as well.
I also wonder if if they're in their, probably 3rd grade, maybe 4th grade, I don't know, in their classroom, if they did like a group project or something group, that could be part of an IEP goal would be like to interact, participate in that group project, that group, whatever.
Yes, absolutely. And so if that's our speech goal, then we can also get creative with our therapy of like, hey, his goal is for social interaction. How can I do a session with him incorporating this group project, making sure that he's able to participate in that? Great. All right, so we're going to move on to the second area of competence from that article is operational competence. So this is having the technical skills that we need to operate the AAC system effectively. So being able to navigate, being able to access not only just words, but phrases and making sentences, troubleshooting our device whenever it malfunctions, charging the device, maintaining the device. This is an area that we may need to develop or account for sensory difficulties, motor difficulties, cognitive skills. So whenever we're looking at systems in general, if the cognitive load for our system is too high, then we're not going to be able to operate it well, right? So we have to make sure that we are accounting for all of those things when we're choosing what system we're going to use. So an example of this that I've seen personally with the students I've evaluated is switch scanning, right? There's so much, potential where we're like, hey, switch scanning is going to be really great for this kid with motor difficulties. But if we don't take into account all of the cognitive steps of like, do they know how to sequence? Do they understand? Do they have the vision to see where the scan is going? There's a lot of steps we have to pre-teach to get effective switch scanning use. So with this idea of operational competence, going back to the Elijah case study, is there an area with our data that we can see where we could make a goal in anything? Not just thinking about, oh, I'm speech, so I'm making a speech goal, but is there a goal as a speech person that we could say, hey, maybe in math or this area, we can make a goal to try this. Let me give you guys another like 2.5 minutes to think about that one. We want to get into small groups and discuss or. Yeah. Right, 30 more seconds. Sounds like using just providing pictures on the stats. All right. Any ideas on operational competence for Elijah? So one that I had thought of was as far as the the behavior and self-regulation. He has the vocabulary related to emotions and self-advocacy, but he's not using them. Can we make a goal that he'll navigate to that in 5 out of 6 opportunities, he'll navigate to emotion vocabulary to express his feelings. Anybody else have thoughts about that?
I'm wondering if we could engage him in programming his device, because
like a lot of our students will use vocabulary that maybe as adults we are not using. Students amongst themselves are using them. Like,
Yeah.
how many skippy toilets I've heard this year in junior high. And so when they have access to that vocabulary, it's more engaging for them. They want access to those words, and then that helps with the buy-in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Not specifically to Elijah, but just one in general that I find with a lot of AAC users is that they're never transitioning with their devices. They're not responsible for taking them out of their backpack. So just depending on how independent he is with that, just he will transition with his device to all,
expected
School
locations,
transitions, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it doesn't have to be just related to Elijah. There's other ideas that you guys have that are related to operational competence. We're happy to hear those as well. I think that that's great. I've had a student that since I've been thinking about this, made a goal that he would just get his own iPad, and then that's opened up into the discussion with the teachers of like, okay, well, if you lock his iPad up, now what are we doing? Like, how is he asking for it? So we can start getting into some of those other issues with being able to use it when we have goals like that. Other thoughts about that?
Even just like knowing when to charge it or like bring it to your teacher to be charged, independently charging it. I feel like that's something that we struggle with at our building a lot because some of our devices are older, so they run out of battery pretty quickly. And then the teachers are just, if the student doesn't let them know that it's just a dead iPad sitting on a desk for half the day,
Yeah,
it's not functional.
right. That, and then like when it freezes, being able to just knowing like, hey, if this isn't working right, what do I do with it?
Self-advocacy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just, hey, yeah. Or knowing where our options are, if we have, the low tech options, those type of things. Great. Awesome. All right, so the third area of competence is our social competence. So being able to use the AAC appropriately in social interactions. This can look like conversational skills, so being able to take turns and maintaining conversations, also being able to communicate for an specific purpose. So this a little bit overlaps with that linguistic where we want different words, but looking at the different communication intents, is it that we can only say that we want things, or can we answer questions? Can we use the device to do a lot more things? And then also using our device for relationship building, right? How are we interacting with our peers? How are we interacting with those people around us? So with that in mind, I'll pull up the Elijah case study again. You can use this information or just think amongst yourself about different goals that we might use to build social competence. Give you guys just a couple minutes on that one. Go back into your groups and discuss. Wait, thoughts on social competence, potential goals for Elijah, or just that you've seen? Yeah.
I think one thing that I've used in my class before, I'm not speech, I'm a classroom teacher, but is like, we put all of the kids' pictures and names in like an attendance folder, because we were having the same issue that he wasn't communicating with peers. And so practicing like, hey, do you want to take attendance for us? And he could go practice all the names. So now on his device, he'll use a student's name to get their attention, and then he'll navigate to a different page to make a comment. And so I sort of felt that the getting people's attention with their name is a high level skill
Yeah.
for some of these guys. And so just even practicing like identifying people by name could be a good goal for him, so that he can practice and they get that feedback of the peers responding, and like that's always fun too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good. But one of my kids, he's in preschool and he's super excited about his device. We just had his picture, even just being able to say, my name is, and being able to introduce ourselves to our friends. But yeah, I think, those type of folders where we include our peers in the pictures of them, they're super powerful, because the names in the picture, like that's the first step to having a conversation, is actually recognizing that those people exist and how do I get in touch with them. Anybody else had good social success? I think, also this can be a place where we put in like a my favorite things folder, right? Like being able to just tell people things about us, whether that's just phrases or some of those type of things, just being able to, on Zoom, they can also add comments, thanks. Yeah, just being able to talk about the things that matter to us. Incorporating that into goals, or again, where we've had those goals like, hey, in reading, they're going to, or for Elijah in writing, he's going to tell us something he likes about himself, right? Because first we have to be able to identify that we like things to be able to have conversations about them. Yeah.
Sorry, me again,
No,
but
you're
the other thing we did that we liked recently is we're like very silly in my class, so we have a lot of like catchphrases and like jokes, like we do a social trivia and then I say it like social trivia and they all clap. So we like added those kind of things into his device as well, like a recording of us like slamming the table for him so that he could join in, or like him saying his name in a silly voice.
Yeah.
Just trying to like make it more fun so that he gets like laughs from it or gets to engage. And so he's liked that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I was doing a presentation at UVU for one of their education classes a couple of weeks ago, and I got the question of like, we're doing ABA therapy, they bring the device in, we have these specific things, and he hates the device. He hates it. He doesn't want to touch it. He doesn't want to use it. What do I do? And one of the first things I asked her is like, what are you doing that's not work? Like, well, how are we making this thing, like, we're already doing some of the hardest things we have to do. How are we making this work and making it harder? Or are we making it a way to interact? And then sometimes we have to do work with it too. And the social component of that is one of the best things we can do. Making it fun, being able to interact with our class in a way that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. If we make this something so valuable that we can do something we couldn't do, then we're starting to get that buy-in. I tell families a lot when I've done parent trainings, like, more than anything, if you can be silly and be fun and use the chat feature and, make jokes and say silly things, that's where we start to see the students liking this and using it, and not it just being work that I keep in my backpack because I don't want to do it. So yeah, social can be a great doorway into that. Any other thoughts about social competence? Okay. So the fourth one, arguably, some people have added other levels of areas of competence to this, but these are the original ones in the Janice Light study. So the last one being strategic competence. So this goes along with being able to overcome the limitations of our system, right? So when someone's still not understanding me, being able to repair that communication breakdown, being able to speed it up, it's not fast enough. different ways to get the things we're communicating across. This area is going to be especially important. We have students who are really functional, like we talked about that competence being functionality, except for when we change to a more demanding situation or a novel situation. This is when we're going to start wanting to have that strategic competence. So again, one more time back to Elijah. Use that data if you want, or just thinking about, okay, what kind of goals can we make for our students, if you have your own student, that can work on strategic competence. Give you guys 2 minutes. Like we're all mostly wrapped up. Does anybody have thoughts on strategic competence? Goals that you might make or that you've found successful for your own kids? One that I've made for some of my speech kids is being able to recognize a communication breakdown and then use a strategy to repair it. I think a big part of being able to repair a communication breakdown is knowing it happened. And so sometimes if we have students who aren't able to recognize that, working on that. Also, I've done some goals for my students who are like mad like that, of like, okay, let's calm down when that breakdown happens. And then persist in, can I describe the item? Can I tell you what letter it starts with? So then we can work on teaching other ways of, hey, can I answer questions of, is it in the people folder? Yes or no? Like, so once we can identify that that's happened and also breathe through it and stay calm, then can we do something different to be understood? So looking specifically at like Elijah, especially, this happens a lot with the behavior, but being able to say, hey, I can tell you're frustrated. Let's go and find our frustrated, so you can tell me that you're frustrated. Then let's go through, okay, what are you looking at? What are you trying to communicate? Other thoughts on strategic after those? Okay. So this only works when we put it all together, right? So we have to integrate those competencies, because if we just stay on that linguistic competency until the kids in high school, like they'll just tell us what they want and need, then that's when we also can start to see behaviors and other things, because they're bored. I've been telling you what I want and need for forever. That hasn't worked. What are we doing to integrate this? What are we doing to move on? So we may not be able to incorporate every area of competence into every, like, I can't do all 4 in every reading goal, but throughout our comprehensive IEP for our students each year, can we figure out how the different areas we're going to incorporate this competence in some way, so that we're overall building our competence in AAC through that plan? And that also is where this becomes this is a your goal and this is a your goal. This is our students' goal, and as a team, These are our goals that we're working toward for our student. So with the Elijah, so from here, there's a couple of options. I want this to be beneficial for everyone. We can go back into the Elijah case study and look and see if there's any other areas we might add goals for Elijah. We can look at some of the other case studies that I have made, or we can talk about if there are some questions or things that with your own students you guys are interested in talking about. I also have prepared a little bit where we can talk about how this integrates in with AI, which is the new huge thing that everyone's wanting to do with writing their IEPs and writing their goals. From the audience, what do you guys prefer? What would be the most helpful? Because I want this to be what you guys find helpful and need. Any votes?
Either additional case studies or personal.
Okay. Perfect. Let's go into maybe this case study 3, if you guys want to look through this and see if there's any, and then we can go into some of our own personal. So thinking about the 4 different competencies and integrating, hey, we want a comprehensive plan for Jordan where we get at least each competency in one of those different instructional areas. Think about that. I'm gonna give you guys like 3 to 5 minutes or until I see the conversation winding down to kind of say, oh, these would be some good IEP draft goals for him. And then we'll talk from there. So, yes. Oh. Zoom crew, if you have anything that you want to throw in there as well, please let us know. If you want, any goals that you've written or any of your own personal kids that you want to talk about, you guys can also throw that in on the Zoom chat. Every second. Okay, that's that timer. So, starting with the easy one, ideas of a linguistic goal. Yeah.
Just looking at all these things, to me, it just looks like he needs more vocabulary, like more, so whether we're focusing on like using verbs so he can express like the things he wants to do, or even just like focusing on maybe like core words that we're using every day. I think just like pumping up his vocabulary and just helping him kind of express himself more will be helpful in like kind of all of these areas.
Great.
Another thing I thought about is like, have we looked to see if his AAC device is meeting his needs, or if it's time to go with something that's more robust?
Could be.
So I guess the thing that I'm thinking about is, we think about these competencies, at least I do, in the form of like a pyramid where operational competency is like the base level. And I'm looking at this and it says that he uses, or that student uses gestures instead of his AAC device. So before I'm even, this is again just me, but before I'm even looking at a linguistic aspect, I want to look at the operational aspect. I want to be able to say, can the student get to the emotions folder? Can the student get to the needs folder or the interest folder or whatever? Before I guess in my mind, that's where I'm going with this.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point, right? Like, how can we build vocabulary if we don't know where vocabulary is? And so so where do we put that goal in?
I mean, you could make an operational competency goal for any one of those areas essentially.
Yeah, for any of them. And so that can be, again, a place where it becomes not a, hey, speech is gonna work, because if we only do that in that 20-minute speech, that's gonna have to be an overall, it can be in all of these areas, right? So operational competency, especially like with the math concepts, like, does he know where the math concepts are in some of the apps? That's a lot of navigation that we have to do. And so there does become a balance of like, hey, we need to show progress in all of the different academic areas, and we need goals in all of the different academic areas. So how are we building on the needs of them in each of those areas? Great. So then we have lots of options for operational. What about social?
It looks like that he wants to be social, and he wants to engage with his peers, so I think, it's kind of what we were talking about earlier, but just adding, like, can we put even like pictures of his peers on his table, or add things into his device of his teachers and people he wants to talk about, so if he's going up to them, then he has some sort of way that he can say their name and, recognize them.
Yeah, I think that's right on with that, not consistently initiating communication. That's a great way that we could start initiating communication. And then strategic. First one that I would think of is in that behavior and self-regulation, being able to just be able to say, I'm frustrated, right? Because he needs to recognize that he's frustrated or something's happening before we can go into, hey, can I ask for a break? Again, operational would come into play at that point. Does he know where you say, hey, he has the tools for requesting a break and asking for help, but he's not using them. Well, does he know where to find them? Does he know how to? And so that is another good example of, hey, while we're working on some of these areas, can we, if we have operational being our big one, how are we incorporating that into all of that? What do you guys think? Do you think, we focus more on just the one operational, or do we see the merit in working on all of them together? While building, especially that operation. Any other thoughts on that?
I think strategic, like, arguably might be the most important because it takes so much time. to like plan ahead on what they have to say. Like, they can't say anything if we don't give them the access to it. So like even just making sure that everything is organized in a way that the adults in your room can help. Know how to navigate the iPad is, we use iPad, but I'm
Yeah.
sure most everybody. Use the iPad as well. Because like they could be operational with like one page, but if it takes some time to just sit and decide, I'm gonna program this to fit our day.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of times we just like are so busy that we don't do that ahead of time, and then the kids aren't successful and have negative associations with it.
And if we may know how to operate and find all of the different words, but do we know how to apply them, when to use them strategically, when it's appropriate to use them? So they kind of, it all comes together. We have to have sometimes multiple of these for any of them to be beneficial. Thoughts on your own students? So we did another case study. How about in our own personal students? Does anybody have questions or need?
I have a nonverbal student that uses an AAC and he can find his way around it somewhat and find things. But what I'm struggling with is getting him to use it for more than just commenting. He wants to comment on things, something that he likes, something that he wants to do. And then I try to, respond back. But to get any kind of answer a question, anything else, he's not interested at all. And so, and he doesn't get enough modeling, because I know that's one of the things that's this classroom is specifically structured a certain way so that he doesn't necessarily have to communicate, because he can understand, he's just not verbal, so he knows what's happening. And he just has to follow along. He doesn't have to communicate. And so, or when he breaks down, he still doesn't use it to communicate.
Yeah.
So I'm just struggling trying to.
So what do his comments look like? Are they just one word? Are they?
Oh, I want Christmas cards. I want Christmas trees. I want to go to the library. Goodbye, all done.
So some requesting, but not for things that are, so maybe it's
Like
like
right there.
irrelevance, like they're not relevant to comments and they're not,
Right.
okay. Anybody have thoughts? And so
And he
what kind of
doesn't-
system is your?
He doesn't have high reading skills, but he can like look at a word sometimes and type it in
Okay,
and
So
come,
it's-
so it's like,
That's some
it's
good-
hard to know.
maybe some good visual spatial, like copying skills,
Mhm.
okay, but what is the system? that they're using? Protocol, okay, and so putting together multiple words and putting it and.
Well, he could put
activating the
together
message.
2 or 3 words, but it's usually almost always, I want is the
I want
go-to.
where we're at.
I
Okay,
want whatever it is.
Are there times throughout the day where a parent is like sitting with him and already working on something else? Or maybe like a snack time or a lunchtime, something that might be motivating, that would be a time that they could model? And you could sit with them and model what that would look like? And just start them out once or twice a day and then build on that?
There are, and I've done that a few times. It's just
there's,
hard to get the buy-in for them to continue doing it because, it's because it's behaviors too. It's not just, it's a severe behavior
Mhm.
in addition to.
So,
Are they
One-
a just
one of my-
language processor too?
what?
Are they a gestalt language processor too?
Like phrases?
Did you?
I don't think so, but I don't know.
I'm just thinking like I want is so rote, it's
Yes.
so prompt dependent, it's the only thing that everybody starts working on. I want this, I want that, so that's all he's ever probably.
What I want is motivating, right? We want the students to be able to have what they want because that makes them happy. And so we get a lot of good buy-in from starting for asking.
But you can vary the phrases too, you can change pro loco to go, instead of food category, the first thing it could be under the food category, let's eat this, let's
Yeah.
eat this, so you're hearing a variety of
Different
different
phrases.
phrases and he's learning some new vocabulary. So you can kind of switch up
As
and take a step back from the I want to
to,
get some more language and vocabulary in there too.
it's a good idea.
Change. I feel like what she's describing is just a problem that a lot of us in the schools deal with. And I know our building, we work with elementary age, and I'd say like 60% of our kids that is non-speaking. And a lot of what we do is just play, and we'll try to figure out their interests and just play. And there's still a lot of commenting and requesting, but if they're playing and they're engaged, you can get so much descriptives in there, and
Mhm.
verbs, and just like
Yeah.
a lot of
Good
good
modeling.
meaty vocabulary.
Mhm.
And then something that I mean, I think it's a battle that will be fought for a very long time, but something that we've been trying to do to get buy-in from staff, like the paras, in the classroom and the teachers, is we've kind of had to get admin on board to be like this, using their devices and modeling and having access throughout the day is in their IEP, and that needs to be a part of what you're looking for when you go into the classroom to observe that class. Are the paras modeling?
Mhm.
Do the teachers have all the devices out?
Yeah.
Because my 30 minutes a week in the classroom isn't gonna be life changing,
Mhm.
but if the parents and teachers are on board and modeling throughout the day during motivating times and not just during math. important,
Right.
Then that's when we see the progress, right?
Yeah.
It's just so.
Which
few and far-
is part of our, importance of, hey, can we incorporate that into some of our academic goal areas so that we're then saying, hey, this has to be in reading and in math. One of the things that I would think of with your student would be moving on to the next most powerful thing after being able to tell us what we want is being able to tell us what we don't want. So then I would move to something that he hates and being like, oh, you want this thing that you hate? Like, then we can start working on not and getting into that negation. That's often what I'll tell people is, hey, once we got requests, let's go to rejection. And then we can work on, tolerating, being told no, those type of things. But so what would the IEP goal look like if we're wanting to make progress? It could look like, hey, he'll tell us what he doesn't want, or he'll request or reject a turn and an activity. What else? Other goal ideas for this student?
We have goals in our building that like kids will appropriately protest because our kids are really good at protesting. It's just not always in a safe way.
Yeah. Without, using, I usually say with symbolic.
Yeah.
Yeah. With symbolic language.
Right.
Without the presence of maladaptive behavior, being appropriate, that goes into strategic, social, all of our competence. We need all of that to be able to do something like say, no, I don't want that. Then once we understand I want that and I don't want that, then we can move into I like that and I don't like that. I like and don't like are more abstract. And so we're just moving on that continuum of abstract thinking. Anybody else? Got like 5 more minutes.
I was gonna say, back to your kid, I feel like he already is doing some things, he is requesting, he is some socialization. So yeah, thinking about more, just like other functions of communication.
I would say, yeah. Because it's great, he's putting words together, like our last case study isn't putting words together at all, so then we might be doing, hey, he's gonna put 2 words together, but if you're getting 3 words, that's when I move away from like utterance length and more into those different, communication intents, for sure. But then how do we make answering questions or asking questions motivating?
I'm obviously coming from the opposite side as like the classroom teacher, but I think too, what could help is like the speech. I've had really amazing speech therapists, thankfully, and like they have approached it more as like, I need you guys' help because my 15 minutes, exactly like Michelle said, my 15 minutes isn't enough. My 30 minutes isn't enough. So can I show you what I am doing and I'll demonstrate it for you and then maybe you guys can practice. And so like picking a time of day that I don't know what the setting is or if it's pull out or whatever it is for this student, but if you could turn it into like push in to when they're doing calendar or something and you show it's more, which I know you're still supporting the student, but like you're also supporting the paras and like showing them your knowledge. And then it helped, like you're teaching the whole class. I always explain that to my parents, like if the kid's lowering on speech minutes, which you know happens all the time. Because you guys have the craziest case lists ever, but the saying like their job is sort of to train me so that I am like an extension of their knowledge. And so that's helped like my paras have buy-in because they're like, oh, well, Miss Brenda told me to do this like during calendar, so I need to do this or, you know, something like that.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate you being here for perspective because we need perspective from the teachers and sometimes we get caught in our own little speech bubble. I think that that's a really good point. And another thing that's been successful is like, hey, giving somebody a special job, right? Like, hey, you are going to be the one that models during calendar and that's really great. So that, you know, whichever tech knows, like during this time, I'm doing that modeling. Also breaking it down, and what I've told a lot of my techs is, it could be really overwhelming to just say, hey, model all the time, right? If we can pick like, hey, you're in charge of the math center, so I want you to get really good with math words. And this is how we're working on math. And you know, if you can just show him every day how to go to the shapes folder, we're building that operational, we're building all of those competencies, and we're getting that buy-in from our technicians in something that's manageable for them, because they have to deal with that same cognitive load of like, hey, if you told me to model everything that I ever did, and I'm trying to keep the kids alive, we're done, I can't do it, you know, and so making it more manageable for all of us. And we all have that, arguably building that competence with the staff as well, because we have to build their competence in all of these ways as well.
I think coming at it too from an angle of like, it's life-changing for a student to be able to communicate, but it's also gonna be life-changing for you. Because if your student can communicate, they're not gonna slap you across the face. So I feel like I've gotten a lot of buy-in with paras that way too. Like I know it's a lot of work and it's another thing you have to do, but like we have classes where teachers have 14 iPads devices in one class. And they're overwhelmed
Yeah.
and it's a lot.
Mhm.
And iPads are breaking, they're being thrown at people's heads and it's just a safety issue, but coming at it, like if we can get their communication going, it's
Yeah.
gonna make all our lives easier.
Yeah.
And safer.
Yeah, and like, hey, this is a lot of work in the beginning, you know, and talking to the point that, hey, this isn't gonna just magically fix everything. There's a component that we're all going to have to work to put in to get it to be successful. The kid's doing a lot of work, we're doing a lot of work, but if we can all put in that work, then we can hopefully get to that place, definitely. Any other, we are pretty much done. Unless you guys have any other thoughts or questions, as far as AI and goals, the biggest thing to know is it's going to be as effective as the prompting that you put in, right? So if you want a good IEP goal through AI, you're going to have to make sure that you're including like the good prompt for it anyway. You don't have to go into that too much, but here's my email if you do have questions. And yeah, thanks guys for participating and
Thank you.
yeah.